Welcome to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. It's been a wild year in housing, in the economy. What lessons can you glean from it going ahead? Then in the second segment of the show, an in-house chat as we talk about a framework for how you can set and achieve any goal in a way that you probably never thought about before here on this year's finale show of Get Rich Education. The people that our listeners can't stop talking about are Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They provided you with more loans than anyone. It's where I got my last few loans, and they finance single-family income property up to fourplexes. They're the number one lender for both beginners and veterans. Start your pre-qualification, chat with President Chaley Ridge personally, and you'll end up with your custom plan for expanding your cash flowing portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Minnesota's Twin Cities to Washington's Tri-Cities and across 188 nations worldwide. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. The pandemic is serious and people have suffered. And today we're going to laugh to keep from crying a little bit. Really, COVID-19 was the granddaddy of all exogenous shocks. Remember back to January and February, the economy and the housing market were normal and growing. And then with pandemic shutdowns in March, well, in both March and April, we saw a decline in real estate purchase applications. People were wary of others coming in for an open house. People just didn't know about being out and about. And when I had some prominent real estate providers on the show this spring, I was asking the question, do you think real estate will go down in value? Because that was a valid question then. High unemployment is what made people think that the housing market could fall. Well, then in late spring and early summer, that proved that it did not. Sheesh, today it feels like every American that can afford it wants to buy a house. But here's what generally happened. The people that went unemployed, they were the ones that couldn't qualify for a home anyway. Think of a restaurant worker, and then those that could qualify for a home before the pandemic, they're the same types of people that were more likely to have kept their jobs anyway, and that they did. They bought real estate, and it really poured dollars into it. Housing price appreciation year over year was up about 4% last year. This year accelerated to an appreciation rate of about 10% per Freddie Mac. In fact, the median price of a single-family home in America today is now up to $325,000. In California, it crossed the $700,000 mark this summer. Both of those are records. At the beginning of the year, remember, we were still enjoying the longest period of economic expansion in all of American history. The unemployment rate was only 3.5%, but with shutdowns, some people were concerned that the unemployment rate could reach dismal 1930s Great Depression levels of 25%. Even for those that kept their job in the pandemic, it really was not good times by any stretch.
Keeping your head above water, making a wave when you can. Temporary layoffs. Good times.
Oh yeah, good times. Well, yeah, not really. But unemployment didn't nearly reach Great Depression levels. It shot up and then peaked out around 15% by April and now has settled down last month to 6.7%. The CARES Act was the legislation that provided injections of monetary stimulus into the economy. It led to most every American benefiting in some way. Most notably, some lower and middle class people got $1,200 stimulus checks. Stimulus helped lead to unthinkably low mortgage rates of under 3.5% for rentals and under 2.75% for owner-occupied homes. I discussed forbearance, foreclosure, and eviction moratoria extensively on the show this year. I think one of the most outstanding jaw droppers for real estate investors is that in September, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, banned most evictions to the end of the year. That was an unprecedented move. People were like, the CDC can do that? Tenants paying the rent has been uneven like nearly everything else. If you own big urban apartments, you probably don't have as high of a collection rate as you do if you own suburban single-family homes. It feels like everyone wants to either own or rent suburban or rural single-family homes these days. Among all real estate types, I have touted here on the show from the very beginning, back in 2014, that I think it makes the most sense to focus on residential. People are not going to stop needing an affordable place to live, and the pandemic accelerated remote living and these working trends that were really already in place, but they really got close to full adoption quickly this year. Well, the demographics, what it means is that we have a lot of replacement housing demand for the next many years. At some point, when interest rates rise, that will impede affordability. Few people think that that's going to happen anytime soon. If you look at the parts of the consumer economy where there were buying surges, sales soared to the point of having inventory shortages for furniture and for home improvement items and for home gym equipment and even for pets. Well, what do all those things have in common? Furniture, home improvement items, the gym equipment, and the pets? Well, they all involve the home, and that means that people need to have more space. You can say that the space race took place on Earth this year, and that's why single-family home rental and buying demand has outstripped the housing demand for smaller apartment units. Single-family housing starts have remained stubbornly under 1 million per year for over a decade now, but there is some hope that they will rise in 2021 given the obvious demand. Another real estate sector that's done quite well is warehouses because they help fuel the e-commerce boom that helps lead to this do everything from home lifestyle. Retail real estate and office real estate, they are among the very worst performers. Oh yes, the decline of The Office. Much like the old Dunder Mifflin Paper Company in Scranton, Pennsylvania, led by the bumbling antics of Michael Scott, played by Steve Carell. Oh dear, it's been the death of Dwight Schrute and the popular show The Office's entire concept. When it comes to the election, we've discussed what the incoming president means for real estate investors. As for the outgoing president, if you just want a 4-word reason on why he lost, I think it is best summed up as he couldn't overcome COVID. The pandemic hasn't only been good for real estate, it's also been pretty good for stocks. After an initial swoon back in March, most indices have surged. We don't talk about stocks too much here on the show because for everyday people, it just does not have a track record for building wealth. But understand this, when it comes to stocks and companies, this might make your jaw drop. As recently as 2011, do you know what the world's biggest company was? This company has now been booted out of the Dow Jones where they had been for almost 100 years. Do you know who I'm talking about? Any idea of who this is? I think I can just deliver one word to you that will tell you how much the entire world has changed in this past decade. That company is Exxon. Yeah, the world's biggest company just 9 years ago. The oil and energy conglomerate Exxon, now not even in the Dow anymore. E-commerce companies and social platforms have surged. The pandemic made that surge greater. We're talking about companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. One place where low interest rates have further dragged down investor returns is with savings accounts. A few years ago, at the online bank leaders offering the best rates that didn't emphasize a brick and mortar presence, well, in those types of accounts, savers were getting around 2%. And now even the best online savings account rates are around 0.6%. Well, that just expects to push more of these yield-starved people into assets like real estate. They need to chase that yield. As we look ahead to 2021, understand that this year, the U.S. housing market has continued to remain such a bright spot really in the entire world's economy, as so many other areas continue to struggle amid stay-at-home orders and economic shutdowns. This year seemed to prove that anything is possible. We had wildfires, we had hurricanes, the pandemic to civil unrest, and then a deeply divisive political campaigning season that drove record-setting voter turnout. Really, what 2020 did was everything except follow its original forecasts. Well, the pandemic also knocked out some Get Rich Education events that we had planned, like our New York City meetup and our real estate field trip to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I hope to get some of those sorts of things back on the calendar so that I can meet you in person if I haven't. Let's expect the economy and the housing market to pick up steam in the next couple years. Businesses will be open again. That sort of thing is going to encourage reinvestment. I've begun to do a little travel. I'm here in Henderson, Nevada today, which is just outside Las Vegas. For the next 2 weeks, I expect to be hosting the show from Scottsdale, Arizona, which is just outside Phoenix, and then spending much of February in Anchorage, Alaska. Now, to discuss something more timeless, we've talked about my goals here on the show in years past. Today, it's an in-house chat with our own Andrea as we discuss a framework for you achieving your goals shortly. She's going to give us concrete examples, dollar values of just what her goals are. Well, if you spent a year pounding quarantine Cheez-Its and have body by Cheez-It, sorry, I cannot help you there. I'm into fitness, but this is not a fitness show. For finance and real estate investing goal achievement, I've got what you need straight ahead. Hey, here's a reminder to join us on social media. On most channels, our name is Get Rich Education, like there on Facebook and Instagram. On Twitter, we're Get Rich Ed. Some interesting things happen there on GRE Social. In fact, consider this. If you would ask most people on the street if they want more inflation of their dollar, I would estimate that 95% or more might say, no way, are you kidding me? But on our recent Instagram poll, we asked if you would like to see more inflation. 61% of you said yes, 39% said no. If you're a new listener, that might sound kind of off to you, but of course the longtime listener knows that here you learn how to profit from inflation, and inflation is the long-term trend, so you ought to learn how to do that. Yes, join us at Get Rich Education on social. But our best material outside of the show here comes from our no-nonsense, wealth-building, educational, don't quit your daydream letter. Every word of that is written by me, no robots, no ghostwriters, it's truly me. And you can get that free for more prosperity in the new year and every year at getricheducation.com/letter. That's our email newsletter. How do you virtually guarantee that you'll meet any goal that you set for yourself? That's straight ahead. I'm Keith Weinhold. This is Get Rich Education. Congress just made it possible to get up to $100,000 out of your current 401k or TSP to invest in real estate, gold, or even your own business. That's even if you're still working, and avoid the IRA UBIT tax. The thing is, you can get your money tax and penalty free for a limited time. The EQRP is your secret weapon. With the CARES Act expiring soon, the EQRP company helps you unleash your retirement funds now. Learn more and text message EQRP in all capital letters to 72,000. Most rental property investors choose either positive cash flow or home price appreciation, but one real estate market can provide both. Jacksonville, Florida. With 9% lower home prices than the national median, 1% higher gross rents, and Jacksonville has appreciated 34% more than other comparable cash flow markets since 1991. Get positive cash flow today and appreciation for tomorrow. To invest for cash flow and growth in Jacksonville, go to cashflowandgrowth.com.
This is Rich Dad Advisor Tom Wheelwright. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold and don't quit your daydream.
Well, I'd like to welcome Andrea back onto the show. She runs the operations here at Get Rich Education. Did anything interesting happen with you this past week, or what happened?
Well, Keith, I wouldn't say anything super interesting. It's been kind of business as usual. I did get to connect with some bigger investors in the multifamily syndication space. So it was really neat. Got to talk to them and kind of making some plans for future goals, which ties into what we're going to talk about today. What about you?
Yeah, syndication is a route that some people want to take after they've accumulated experience being a direct investor themselves. With me, I don't know that so much interesting happened this past week. I think I'm anticipating what life is going to be like when the pandemic's over. I haven't worked out in a public gym since July. That's really interesting for me. And I've only been exercising in my garage, which is kept at a temperature of 45 degrees. So somehow I seem to thrive in an environment that's not much warmer than most people's refrigerators, but it works for me. So, well, we're near year end here, and that's when a lot of people think about goal setting. So where do you begin with goal setting?
Yeah, that's a great topic for this time of year and very timely because my husband and I have started having some conversations around that and trying to figure out what we want to do in the next year or two and how to align that with our long-term goals. So, when we get started doing that, Keith, the first thing that we really asked ourselves is why are we wanting to set these goals? Kind of what do we have in mind? And what does that support the life that we want to live? So that's the first step for us.
That is a great leading question, I think, before one sets goals. And you think about that goal framework, does this activity or does this goal support the life that I'm trying to create? And I think 2020 has been a really interesting year because it's been a year that disrupted a lot of people's goals that they had set in the previous year. And hey, maybe for some people, it's disrupted things for the good. For example, you didn't know that now you could work from home, or maybe you can work from anywhere, or maybe you can create this lifestyle where you're working in your RV and you have your RV set up at a little pullout along the road in Arches National Park, Utah, for example. So I think a lot of people can get this greater vision for a more expansionary life that they can create and have a greater measure of freedom than they did before. And I know you think of a few important things you like to keep in mind at the beginning of goal setting yourself. So tell us about those.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of the really important things to keep in mind when you start this process is, number one, you have to believe it's actually important. For example, one of my big long-term goals is to have a certain amount of passive net income per month. I think it's important because then I can live the lifestyle that I want and spend the time I want with my family. Something that would be really nice, but not important is, I'd like to have healthier, thicker hair, but it's not important to me, but it'd be nice. So, that's the difference between what's important and what's not. The second part of that is you need to actually believe that you can achieve it. For example, my net income passive goal is $30,000 a month. That's definitely achievable. What's probably not is $100 million a month in the next year. So, shooting for things that I know I can do versus things that probably aren't that likely.
These are some great distinctions here. And when it comes to real estate investing, a lot of people have this goal of having a certain number of doors, like owning 100 rental doors, whether that be across apartment buildings, single family homes, mobile home parks, whatever it is. And that's okay. And that could be worthy. But I think ultimately, when you think about the freedom that you want, yeah, it does come down to more of that $30,000 a month from residual income from real estate to really give you that outcome that you want ultimately. And you're really touching on that SMART goal acronym, right? I think you, the listener, have probably heard the mnemonic acronym SMART goals before. SMART, the acronym, is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And I'm hearing about some of those with you. For example, relevant and hair thickness. How important is that really to the outcome that you want in designing that lifestyle that you want for yourself? So yeah, it comes back to those SMART goals.
That's right. Yep. And, one of the things you just touched on with the SMART goals is making it measurable. And I hear a lot of people say, I want to be wealthy or I want to make a lot of money every month. And what does that mean? That's not concrete. That's not measurable. That's very subjective, versus I want to make $30,000 a month in net residual real estate income.
So when it comes to the time-based component, do you have a time frame in mind for when you want to achieve 30K of residual real estate income?
I do. So, my max that I've set that at is 10 years, and I've made a very conservative plan to do that. However, what I'm really shooting for is less than 5 years. And so there's different ways to get there. there may be ways that would take more of my time and effort to get there a little bit faster versus doing things where I have a little bit more of my time back to me and takes a little bit longer. So different ways to get there, but 5 years minimum, 10 years maximum. There's 3 different ways that I kind of evaluated how I could hit that 30K passive income. So I'm already at 10K. So I need 20K more, per month to be able to meet that. So I said, okay, well, I really like Section 8 homes, for example. And if I wanted to pay all cash and get Section 8 homes, how many would I need to get me to my monthly income? I could purchase X amount. At the end of the 30 years or 20 years, however long my amortization is, I'd have exactly this amount in equity depending on appreciation. Another way to look at it is if I leverage, the same thing with Section 8 homes, how many years would it take me to come up with that down payment for that? How much would my equity be at the end of the term? And how long would that take me overall? And then I looked at a couple more ways. Well, what if I went with duplexes, which I own several of now? Same equation to figure out how long that would take versus the equity, and then multifamilies. And so I have these 4 different options here of what I know I can do and I know I can execute on, but what's going to get me there the fastest while still saving me time and allowing me to spend time with my family. So just keep in mind that there's not one way to get to your goals. There's usually multiple ways. So make sure that you're evaluating that and making the best choice for yourself.
And I know you're a believer in writing your goals down. Tell us about that.
Yes, I am. So I personally kind of go the old school way and I use an Excel spreadsheets. I have it based out month by month and then smaller goals week by week to get to that larger goal that I have set for the year, for example. There are a lot of ways to do it other than that. There's lots of good apps out there. People have journals. Some people like, personally writing it down into an actual piece of paper. But I use Excel and that's how I track it.
I know you're a believer in the power of networking. And back to the old Jim Rohn quote, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And that helps you set benchmarks and think at a higher level. So I know that for one thing, you belong to a mastermind group called GoBundance that might help shape your thinking and your goal setting. When you get around those bigger thinkers, it makes you think bigger and set bigger goals.
That's absolutely right. So if you had talked to me less than a year ago, my goal was to make $10,000 a month net passive income. And now we switched that to $30,000. And part of that is, that group and the goals that I set for myself let me achieve that pretty quickly. So once I realized $10,000 a month net passive income wasn't that much money in the grand scheme of things, I upped that a lot. And I probably wouldn't have done that without the support and accountability.
In that group, helping take you from a $10,000 monthly goal to a $30,000 monthly goal, not only do you start to learn how that's achievable because you see other people doing it, but is there any outcome for you that's changed? Because we're talking about income here, but of course, it's ultimately about your outcome. So do you think of a different outcome for yourself and your husband with what 30K a month gives you versus what 10K a month would have given you?
That's a great question, Keith. And that's exactly what caused me to kind of up that. So at $10,000 a month, I'd be comfortable. I keep my bills quite low. I don't have a lot of overhead expenses. I'd be comfortable. At $30,000, I can travel and pretty much do what I want. I can have that second and third vacation home. We can be nomadic, which is a big thing for us that we're wanting to do at some point. And it'd be very hard to do that on $10,000 a month.
More money just gives you more options. Who doesn't want more options in life? In fact, I think options is really a proxy for the word freedom.
That's right.
Another important thing that you do with the network you're in, including your mastermind network, your friends, your colleagues, might even include your family, is you do like to tell people about your goals. And that's difficult for some people. That makes them feel vulnerable, but it makes you feel like you have a stake in the game and now you don't want to fail.
That's right. So I do that a couple of different ways. You'd mentioned GoBundance. So I do have a core group of women that I meet with every other week. And we actually do go through our goals. So we talk about those very frequently, and they're very aware of what my goals are, and they help me brainstorm ways to get there faster. I also meet with my husband, and we talk through our goals on a weekly basis. So we set them every year. We meet every week. And I would say he's probably a little bit better in holding me accountable just because he's there day to day to see what I'm doing and not doing. So that's a huge thing that keeps me driving towards those.
That is rare, and that's fantastic. If you, the listener, think about you and your spouse meeting on a weekly basis about your goals, how much more likely is it that you're going to achieve them or even have them and write them down in the first place? That's not something I hear about very often. And when a lot of people level up their game or think about creating bigger goals for themselves than they even thought they could have had 1 year ago, like with you and your example, going from 10K to 30K, I think a lot of people out there, they start to ask the wrong questions. When you level up, you need to start asking yourself bigger questions. For example, maybe it's a smaller set of questions is, now, how do I build my social media following? Or how do I get to own 100 doors? Or how do I reach $1 million business level? Or whatever your endeavor is. But I think one can say that when you try to level up, a lot of times those are the wrong questions because you're starting to ask, how do I do this? And it's sort of like the entrepreneurial coach, Dan Sullivan, says, ask who, not how. Ask who can do this for me, or who can I bring onto my team that can manage my properties or coach me in doing a syndication, not how do I do it. So who, not how, is often one of those big level up questions in setting bigger goals and expanding our mindset.
That's right. And that's one of the things I've personally struggled with over the last several years of my life is, I want to do everything on my own.
Right.
I think I can do it better. And I've definitely been realizing the past year that's not the case. I need other people in my network. I need support. I need virtual assistants, all kinds of stuff to be able to get to where I want to be. So that's an excellent point. You can't do it yourself if you want to get to where you want to be fast and if you have a large goal in mind.
Now, I know a big part of your goal setting is recording your process as you go along. So you're not just writing down your ultimate goals. So tell me about recording your process as you go through this journey in your goal setting.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, every week we sit down and we go through these goals. Last year, I had probably a little bit too many. This year, we're cutting it down to be a little bit more specific, but smaller goals. So we sit down, we record it on our Excel spreadsheet. We say, did you hit this for the week? If no, why not? And what can you do next week to be able to make sure that you hit that goal? There are times we've also had to recalibrate, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you think you set something that's a little bit too lofty or not challenging enough, make sure that you're flexible and can change that if you need to.
It's that attainable portion, that A of the SMART goals.
That's right.
So tell us more on evaluating the achievement of your goals. I mean, weekly, are you really writing down how much your residual income from real estate is changing? I can't imagine that would be something that you would really want to figure out weekly. So what does the weekly part do for you? Is part of it mindset and strategy? Or?
It is. So I'll give you an example. The past week, my goal was to meet with 3 multifamily syndicators or investors to be able to meet with them, connect with them, get some tips with them, offer value to them as well, if there's any way that I can help them. And in making those connections and understanding what they do, that's helping me get to that net passive income goal. So sometimes it's small like that. Sometimes it's, I need to close a deal this week, or I need to acquire a property. So it's a little bit larger than that, but most weeks it's very small goals.
It might be, I made a connection with this person and I found a way to bring value to this person, which in the short term, in just this past week, doesn't really get me any closer to my goals, but it's not always about me. It's about who can I help? And for example, maybe you just expanded your network 5% in the last week.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's part of the who, not how thing again. So, well, tell us more about the achievement of your goals. Do you find it important to reward yourself as you go along and hit certain benchmarks, or how does that look?
I do. So just because I met with 3 multifamily investors this week doesn't mean that I should go take a weekend down in Central America or anything like that. But, for example, if I make my first large investment, so if I, buy a 20-unit multifamily, I probably would take a really nice vacation to celebrate something like that. There are times with smaller goals around health or things like that, if I've done, say, 3 weeks consecutive of working out, then I'd go have some ice cream or something like that. So I do try to make sure to implement those as well for the smaller things, but save the really rewarding activities for the larger goals.
And if you, the listener, don't remember from when Andrea was on the show here with me the 2 previous times, she has put 28 units in her portfolio in just over 3 years. We're talking typically about properties in the 1 to 4 unit space that are in or near her home market of Brunswick, Georgia, as we're talking about. But yeah, a lot of it is about celebrating on the way. If not now, when?
Exactly.
So tell us more about the time frames. Do you set several goals at once, or do you just set a 1-year goal, or do you have other benchmarks? Like you want to hit this particular benchmark after 1 quarter on the way to your 1-year goal, or how does that look?
It depends. So I do have goals in kind of different categories of life, but if we keep it specific, say to the financial goal for examples of this, I will set sometimes monthly goals. So there's small little steps that I need to take in a month. For example, if I'm wanting to buy a property that's going to cash flow at X amount, I need to be able to get under contract within X amount of time for that. If I am wanting to hit a certain amount of net income by the end of the year, I need to make sure, for example, if it's going to take 3 properties to do that, that I'm getting those 3 properties under contract and closed by the end of the year. So ultimately what I have is this 10-year plan. I back into it and say, in 10 years, I need to meet this number. So how can I get to that in 5 years? How can I get that to 3 years? What can I do this year to be able to do that? So it's kind of setting up a long-term plan, but backing into it and making short-term measurable goals to get there in the meantime.
Yeah, so it's beginning with the end in mind. And when you begin with the end in mind and you track your way back, does that translate to anything? For example, with respect to, I need $225 of cash flow per door to make this happen. Otherwise, that investment wouldn't meet my criteria to get me to my goal.
That's right. Or per property. So if there's multiple doors, I'll say I need to make, for example, on this multifamily that I'm wanting to purchase in the next year, I need to make a net of $5,000 per month or $7,000 per month. So it does translate. I'm very big into numbers, so I do get quite specific with that.
And some like Microsoft Excel spreadsheets in charting their progress toward their goals. I am one of those people because I understand things better if I write the formulas myself, and I feel more like I'm on track toward getting the outcome that I want, and I really understand how I'm getting there. And when it comes to timelines, they say that people overestimate what they can really get done in 1 year, and they underestimate what they can get done in 5 years. So therefore, said another way, people get less done in 1 year than what they think they can, but more done over a 5-year period than what they think they can.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So I'd mentioned, I wanted to hit that $10,000 a month, the net passive income goal. And I thought that it would take me a few years to do that. And I actually hit that in less than a year from the time I started working on it. Now, that's not that I went from 0 to 10,000 in a year, right? But it was over a few years. But I thought at least take me a few more years to get there. And it didn't. It was very quick.
Well, you're very goal driven. You really have achieved a lot in a short period of time. Are there any last things, any other things that people should know in general about goal setting and then getting there?
Yeah, I would say if you're not meeting your goals consistently, I mentioned this earlier, you probably want to sit back and recalibrate. I had to do that this year. 2020 kind of threw a little bit of a wrench into my plans as well. I had some pretty lofty health goals this year, and we found out we were expecting our first child around the summertime.
Yeah.
And some of those health goals got pushed back, and it's okay if things happen. Don't beat yourself up, but get back to it and don't let it slide too long. So, just keep at it, keep trying, keep documenting it, and keep someone around for accountability.
2020 has thrown a lot of people for a loop. And then, yes, you and your husband with the pregnancy as well. So it could be important to stay flexible in your goals in addition to them being SMART goals. But you'll know yourself if you're taking flexible for taking a step back and not doing and not achieving all you can. You would know the difference yourself when you're setting goals. And it's interesting. A lot of people look forward to the new year, happy 2021. But this year, I think more people are looking forward to 2020 being over with.
That's right. But the good thing is, Keith, there's a lot of craziness that's happened in 2020, but there's a lot for people to be thankful of as well. So try to keep a positive mindset around that.
Oh, that's a great thing to finish on. Andrea, it's been great hearing about goal setting. Thanks so much for coming back onto the show.
Thank you, Keith.
Oh, yeah. Good, concrete, well thought out stuff from Andrea there. She emphasizes about how you have to actually believe that your goal is important, and then you believe that you can achieve it and have that support group. And it really helps when you tell others. And when we talk about the way for you to grow bigger, ask yourself that question, who, not how. That is, who can I find that can do this for me? Not how do I do it myself? That really takes some courage on your part. And part of that is because you probably were not raised that way. Think back when you were in grade school, you were taking a test in a classroom of other students. Well, if you didn't know the answer on the test, you can't stick your head up and look around and say who, not how, because if you ask the student next to you for the test answer, then that's cheating. You were raised in a how rather than a who framework. And in adulthood, achieving your real estate, financial, or entrepreneurial goals, if you get courageous enough to find the who's, rather than the hows every time to help you grow, then those who's will go out and find more who's for you. So really, your goal is the what, who not how, is what gets you to that bigger what. When you operate in that framework, you know what else? Today can be your last day of the way that things used to be. Thanks to our own Andrea today, a driven person that clearly knows where she's going. If you enjoyed today's show, consider screenshotting your phone screen with the episode and posting it on your social. Tell your friends about the show. Passing along this content just means the world to me, so please do that if you think it's worth it. All the best to you and your smart goals in the new year. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.